In this video, I want to address the issue of teaching intelligent design theory alongside the theory of evolution in biology class in public schools. And once again, all this can be found in my new book, The Common Sense Ethics of a Blue Collar Philosopher, available at Publish America and other online bookstores. To begin with, let's be honest with ourselves here. We all know that intelligent design theory is truly not the real issue. It's simply a feeble attempt to sneak creationism into the public schools through the back door. In essence, creationists keep losing their court battles to get creationism taught on equal terms with evolution in public schools, so intelligent design was dreamed up by religious special interest groups as a so-called viable alternative. In reality, intelligent design isn't really even a theory. A theory must have at least some physical evidence in order to be called a theory. Intelligent design has none. For example, evolution is a theory because physical evidence was first observed, such as Darwin at the Galapagos Islands, fossils, skeletons, etc., and then the theory was formulated. As far as I know, the only thing intelligent design has going for it is its flimsy premise that life is just too complex to have begun on its own. Or as some others have put it, life is so complex that the odds against it beginning without being purposefully designed are so great that it would be a statistical impossibility. But if this is true, wouldn't it also be true of the designer? Wouldn't the designer be too complex to exist without a designer? If life cannot simply exist by its very nature and out of a natural process, then neither can the designer, right? And so, their premise collapses back upon itself. If life must have an intelligent designer, then the intelligent designer must have an intelligent designer as well. There's simply no getting around that logic. There's also another problem with the so-called odds argument. To anyone reading this, what are the odds against your existence? If I didn't know you existed, assuming that since you're watching this you exist, I could use the odds argument to prove you don't exist. Just think about it. What were the odds against your parents meeting, liking each other enough to have intercourse, and then successfully giving birth to you? Of all the partners or potential partners your parents could have mated with, they chose each other. The odds against your being created were overwhelming. And then we must add to the equation the odds of both sides of your grandparents meeting, liking each other enough to have intercourse, and then successfully giving birth to both sets of parents. Once again, the odds were overwhelmingly against it. But that's still not good enough, because not only would your parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, great-great-grandparents, etc., have to have gotten together, but every generation of your ancestors as well would have had to meet, like each other enough to have intercourse, and then successfully given birth. If all this is added up, the odds against your coming into existence were, as proponents of intelligent design put it, a statistical impossibility. But obviously, since you're watching this video, it must have happened. So what's the difference, statistically speaking, in the odds of you existing on an individual scale and life existing on a universal scale? I would say the odds are probably pretty much equal. Another problem with the odds argument is that it doesn't take enough information into account when determining the odds. Most astronomers think, although it's yet to be proven conclusively, that there are billions of planets in the universe that all have the right conditions for life to exist on them. In other words, they say that, statistically speaking, life must exist elsewhere. But they arrived at this conclusion by first studying the ingredients necessary for life, biology, then by studying our planet, geology, then by studying other planets and stars, astronomy, etc. And only after studying many different branches of science did they come to the conclusion that there are almost certainly billions of planets in the universe that have the capacity to create and sustain life. And how did intelligent design proponents come to their conclusions? Simple. They began with the belief in God, and they came up with a way to try to get God into public schools without officially getting God into public schools, through intelligent design. They use all the same flawed arguments that theologians have been using forever to prove creationism true, but they simply leave out God the creator and insert an intelligent designer. Either way, it's not science and there's no evidence. You cannot begin, as creationists and intelligent design proponents do, by saying, Since evolutionists can't explain in every minute detail the mechanisms of evolution, how life began, where life began, when life began, etc., then obviously a designer must have done it. Just because our scientific knowledge at this point in time cannot explain every minute detail doesn't mean there must be a supernatural or superintelligence behind the origins of life on Earth. Are we going to go back to when everything that was unexplained at the time must have been created by God or the gods? Yes, son. That loud sound you hear, thunder, is God expressing his anger. Yes, son. God is mad at us, so he's throwing lightning bolts at the earth from heaven. Yes, son. Those lights in the heavens are God's. That one is Jupiter, that one is Mars, that one is Venus. Yes, son. Your mother is sick, a virus, because she sinned against God and she is being punished. Yes, son, that tsunami that killed over 200,000 people was an example of God's wrath. After all, didn't you notice that it only struck non-Christian, ungodly countries, etc.? In the past, whenever something was unknown, it was simply attributed to God and then dismissed. Only in relatively recent history has mankind turned to reason and said, I don't know why. Let's use the scientific method to find out. My next question is, why aren't the proponents of intelligent design theory in favor of intelligent designers theory? The most obvious answer is because they're trying to prove there's only one God, monotheism, and not many gods, polytheism. But theoretically speaking, multiple designers makes a hell of a lot more sense than a single designer. To begin with, multiple designers would be a member of a species, and if they're members of a species, they violate no laws of nature. On the other hand, if it's a single designer, it violates all natural laws. Intelligent design proponents cannot point to a single living being and say, that's the only one of its kind. There are no others of that species. Obviously, they can't use an example of an animal going extinct because it was a member of a species. Since they have no examples in reality to point to, their intelligent designer theory is significantly less plausible than multiple designers because every single living organism that's ever been observed in nature is, or was, a member of a species. A monospecies, for the lack of a better word, is a contradiction in terms. In other words, monospecies do not exist. This just shows, once again, that their true agenda is really nothing more than proving the truth of monotheism. That's the end of part 1. I hope you'll watch part 2.